Hello, Malma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. And now to the news. Metro Manila will remain under the General Community Quarantine or GCQ until August 15, as well as other selected areas in the country, according to President Duterte during a public address on Friday. Cebu City was also downgraded to GCQ starting August 1 to the 15th from modified enhanced community quarantine. Let's take a listen.
For the rest of the Philippines, minus NCR, kasi maraming hawaan. Maglabas-labasan kayo. Hindi wala ng katapusan itong hawan. Anyway, it's the vaccine. NCR, Bulacan, Batangas, Cavite, Laguna, Rizal, Cebu, Lapu-Lapu City, Mandawi, at Zamboanga City. Naka sa General Community Quarantine kayo. The rest of the Philippines, modified General Community Quarantine. Itong mga sinabi ko mga Philippines, tiis muna kayo. Yun lang. Na Philippines, okay na. Ito, modified General Community. Kunting ingat lang, huwag do not mix together and observe itong distancing, the distance rule. Yan lang hihingi ko sa inyo.
Also, during the meeting with President Duterte, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque has announced conditionalities that will be imposed on Metro Manila and Calabarzon, which are under extended GCQ. Now, these include carrying out strict localized lockdown or imposition of enhanced community quarantine or ECQ on barangays with 80% COVID-19 cases and stringent enforcement of minimum health standards such as mask wearing, social distancing, face shield use, and frequent hand washing. Meanwhile, the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Diseases has made initial discussions on the use of face shields to complement wearing of face masks in public, particularly in low ventilation settings such as public transportation. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, who is the concurrent IATF spokesperson, mentioned the use of face shields for the National Capital Region and Region 4A, where transmission of COVID-19 cases is high. During President Duterte's talk to the people address on coronavirus disease aired this morning. Now, studies have shown that wearing of face shields, in addition to wearing of masks and physical distancing, would further reduce virus transmission in low ventilation settings. U.S. President Trump floated an unprecedented delay to the 2020 elections, which polls show him losing, but the suggestion drew cross-party fire and has virtually no chance of being accepted. Let's listen in.
I don't want to delay. I want to have the election. But I also don't want to have to wait for 3 months and then find out that the ballots are all missing and the election doesn't mean anything. That's what's going to happen, Steve. That's common sense. And everyone knows it. Smart people know it. Stupid people may not know it. And I don't want to see an election, you know, so many years I've been watching elections, and they say the projected winner or the winner of the election. I don't want to see that take place in a week after November 3rd or a month or, frankly, with litigation and everything else that can happen, years.
Economic pain and mass unemployment, together with what critics call incompetent management of the coronavirus crisis, is a big reason why President Trump finds himself staring down the barrel of defeat in less than 100 days. The Democratic National Committee said in a statement, Trump's threat is nothing more than a desperate attempt to distract President Trump can tweet all he wants, but the reality is that he can't delay the election, and come November, voters will hold him accountable. Presidential elections are scheduled by law to take place on the first Tuesday after November 1, which this year is the third. The U.S. has never allowed a delay holding elections even during the Civil War, and only Congress could change the timing. The pandemic is still out of control across swaths of the United States, most lately hitting Republican-led states like Florida and Texas. Given the virus threat, there are widespread doubts over how many people will come out to vote and whether sufficient volunteers can be found to staff the polling stations. Meanwhile, Republicans pushed back against President Trump when he floated the idea of delaying the presidential election in November. Let's listen in.
Well, never in the history of the country, through wars, depressions, and the Civil War, have we ever not had a federally scheduled election on time. And we'll find a way to do that again this November 3rd.
So just to be clear, you are saying November 3rd set in stone?
That's right. We'll cope with whatever the situation is and have the election on November 3rd as already scheduled.
I understand the president's concern about mail-in voting, which is different than absentee voting. But never in the history of the federal elections have we ever not held an election, and we should go forward with our election. But we should have absentee voting, but this mass just mailing out ballots without having any checks and balances, without people requesting, really brings concern in there. But no way should we ever not hold our election on the day that we have it.
The election will be held on the date set by Congress and the historic date. And with regards to mail-in voting, in my state, we've had it for some time. It works extremely well. The great majority, I think almost 90% of our voters, maybe more than 90%, vote by mail, and it's a system that works pretty well. In fact, if there's a problem of some kind alleged, you go back to the paper ballots. You have an actual record. The challenge sometimes with electronic voting machines is you wonder, gosh, has it been tampered with? Well, you can't tamper with the paper.
Meanwhile, the United States counted 1,379 new deaths from the coronavirus in the 24 hours leading up to 8:30 p.m. Thursday local time or 12:30 GMT Friday, according to a count by Johns Hopkins University. It was the third day in a row with more than 1,200 deaths, according to the Baltimore-based school. The U.S. has tallied a total of 151,826 deaths from COVID-19, making it the hardest hit country in the world. There were also 72,238 new infections officially recorded on Thursday, meaning the U.S. has seen a total of nearly 4.5 million infections since the beginning of the pandemic, with at least 1.4 million of them having recovered. After seeing an apparent improvement in the spread of the virus in late spring, the U.S. has seen a resurgence of high daily cases loads since the end of June, especially in the southern and western parts of the country. And Hurricane Isaias was barreling towards Florida on Friday, a day after the state registered a record 253 coronavirus deaths, and authorities closed down some COVID-19 testing centers to prepare for the storm. Now, Florida has emerged as a major new epicenter of the U.S. battle against the disease, with confirmed cases recently surpassing New York and now second only to California. The state toll has leaped over the past week, and more than 6,500 people have died from disease there, according to health officials. Thursday marked the third consecutive day the state hit a new record for coronavirus deaths. Isaias is expected to strike Florida over the weekend as authorities struggle to contain the disease and is now coursing through the Atlantic Ocean with wind speeds of 80 miles per hour, according to the Miami-based National Hurricane Center. Forecasters are unsure how strong the storm will be when it nears the coast. There is a risk of impacts from winds, heavy rainfall, and storm surges along portions of the U.S. East Coast beginning this weekend in Florida, according to the NHC. adding that tropical storm or hurricane watches could soon be issued. The hurricane has already hit the Dominican Republic, where a 53-year-old man was killed and rivers broke their banks. It also unleashed flooding, toppled trees, and knocked out power for thousands of people in Puerto Rico. To Japan now, where the Tokyo governor said they may reconsider declaring another emergency. Dennis Liu joins us live from Japan. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, Alma. Good evening.
Good evening. Seems there is
In
a
Japan,
spike in cases there.
yes, Alma. Tokyo governor called for restaurants, bars, and karaoke parlors to shut earlier as the capital reported a record number of new infections. Tokyo Governor Koike Yuriko says you may have to consider declaring a state of emergency as she reported a single-day record of 463 new coronavirus cases on Friday. This is the first time Tokyo's daily tally has surpassed 400. Koike told reporters that if the situation worsens, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government will have to consider declaring its own state of emergency to contain the virus. Again, requested that establishments serving alcohol and karaoke parlors close early to prevent a further spread of the virus. This will be effective from Monday through the end of August. Meanwhile, in contrast to Tokyo's governor, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga reiterated the government's stance that Japan did not need to reimpose a nationwide state of emergency. He said the current trend in infections was different from that of the first peak in March and April. That time, there was a greater number of serious cases and infections among the high-risk elderly population. Those under 40 with mild or no symptoms have accounted for up to three-quarters of recent cases, and clusters at bars were blamed for much of the upsurge. The nationwide total expanded to 35,461 on Thursday, including some 700 from Diamond Princess cruise ship, which was quarantined in Yokohama in February. The death toll stood at 1,020. Meanwhile, the Foreign Ministry said Japan is set to allow the return of all foreign nationals, including international students and workers, with valid visa statuses who had left Japan before the entry ban was imposed. They began accepting applications allowing some workers and international students to come back into the country starting next week. Foreign nationals, regardless of their nationality, can seek such permission and will be allowed to enter once they meet entry requirements. Meanwhile, in another news, in Fukushima, Japan, a construction worker died and 19 others injured when an explosion occurred shortly before 9 a.m. Thursday, immediately after the worker entered the Shabu Shabu hot pot restaurant in Koriyama, Fukushima. Police and firefighters suspected that propane gas had leaked overnight and filled a restaurant under renovation before the deadly explosion happened on Friday. Hiroshi Furukawa, a 50-year-old on-site supervisor responsible for the renovation work, was found dead at the explosion site, and 19 others in their 20s to 80s were injured. The shop had been temporarily closed since April amid the COVID-19 outbreak and was scheduled to reopen next Monday, the company said. Investigators found damaged parts of the gas pipes installed inside the building. Propane gas cylinders were also found outside the building were all damaged. Investigators believe the cause of damage was due to the explosion, according to some sources. This is the latest for now, Alma. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis. You do take care and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Alma reporting live from Tokyo, Japan. This is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
And not so good news from Vietnam. Joining us live from Da Nang is Ralph Wandolph Empire. Hello, Ralph. Are you still in Da Nang? Am I right?
Hi there, Alma. Yes, I'm still in Da Nang. I'm currently stuck in Da Nang at the moment.
And yes, not so good news. You've recorded the first death in Vietnam.
That's right, Alma. Vietnam has recorded its first COVID-19 related death as 70-year-old man with a number of underlying conditions. The patient died this morning, of a heart attack at Hue Central Hospital in Tua Tien, Hue Province, where he was being treated for coronavirus. The man, a resident of Hoi An Town, also had a number of other health issues, including serious kidney failure, hypertension, and high blood pressure. On July 9, he was admitted to the Department of Internal Medicine and Urology at Da Nang Hospital after suffering from chest pains. 3 weeks later, as more and more cases emerged linked to the hospital, he tested positive for COVID-19 and was placed in isolation on the same ward to begin treatment. On Thursday, he started to suffer from respiratory failure and was put on a ventilator to help him breathe. He was transferred to Hue Central Hospital on Thursday night in critical conditions. Not long later, he went into cardiac arrest, but medics managed to start his heart beating again. The following morning, in the early hours, he suffered another cardiac arrest, but this time, doctors were unable to save him and he was pronounced dead around 5:30 a.m. Friday morning. It is understood both his son and daughter, along with the neighbor who visited him in hospital, have all tested positive for COVID-19. Now, Alma, in other news, Da Nang is to build field hospital and deploy mass testing for COVID-19. Da Nang will begin its mass testing for all local people to eliminate possible SARS-CoV-2 infections in the community this weekend. Director of the city's health department, Ngo T. Kim Yen, told Vietnam News at least 8,000 medical samples could be taken each day for testing at the city's Center for Disease Control, or CDC. The city also plans to deploy a field hospital at the Tien Son Sports Center for possible COVID-19 patients in the coming days. The 5-story center, covering 30,000 square meters, could provide thousands of beds for patients. At least 1,000 volunteers from medical colleges and health schools, as well as 400 police officers, will track COVID-19 patients' close contacts. Da Nang and Tua Tien, Hue Province are providing medical checks and health declarations for people traveling from Da Nang to Hue at checkpoints in Phu Loc District, Hai Van Pass, and at 2 sides of the Hai Van Tunnel. Quang Nam Province also expanded social distancing measures after Hoi An limited travel. And Alma, just this evening, Vietnam confirms 37 new COVID-19 cases. 26 of them are foreigners or repatriated from overseas. The remaining 11 infections are linked to hospitals in Da Nang, currently the nation's COVID-19 hotspot. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Ralph, for your updates there. And you do take care of yourself, protect yourself there in Da Nang.
Oh, by the way, Alma,
Yes.
I forgot to say that here in Da Nang, the roads are quiet and all stores are closed except supermarkets and pharmacies. And just earlier this afternoon, I received a call from the local government here telling me that they're arranging a free hotel accommodation with free meals to all tourists who are currently stranded in Da Nang. But when I asked about the transportation, going back to Hanoi, they told me that there's no chance at this moment.
Okay, so do you know how long you're going to be there?
Well, at least minimum of 15 days. And then after that,
We'll see.
They will maybe send us an SMS or call. They will give us a call.
All right, thank you very much, Ralph. Do take care of yourself, and thank you for your
You're
updates
welcome,
there.
Alma. This is Ralph Mandel Empire bringing you the latest updates here in Da Nang, Vietnam. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, European neighbors are worried about the surge of coronavirus cases in Spain. Joining us live from Spain is Beverly Madrid. Hello, Beverly.
Hello, Alma. Thank you for having me.
Good evening
Yes,
from Manila.
from
Yes.
Spain.
Yes, go ahead.
After Britain's quarantine move and a travel warning from France, Germany became the latest country to advise Tuesday against holidays in Spain with a surge in virus cases. Many are preparing for a holiday after months of lockdown. Fans are concerned about returning home, with Berlin warning against travel to of northern Spain, including the hugely popular Catalan coast. The call followed warnings from France against travel to Catalonia and Britain's decision to quarantine anyone arriving from Spain for 14 days. As one of the world's top tourist destinations, it has been a major blow to Spain, which relies heavily on British tourism. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez quickly hit back at the move, denouncing it as unbalanced and insisting Spain's most popular tourist destinations might even be safer than the UK. We want to send a clear message. We are a secure destination that has made preparations and strengthened itself to deal with the virus and any outbreaks, said government spokeswoman Maria Jesus Montero. But British Prime Minister Boris Johnson defended the decision in light of the signs of a second wave of the pandemic in Europe. Madrid had wanted an exemption for areas like Canary Islands or the Balearic Islands, where there has been a very low incidence of the virus, but London refused. In Spain, where the virus has claimed more than 28,400 lives, there has been a surge in cases in recent weeks. According to Tuesday's count, an average of more than 1,800 new cases per day have been detected over the past 7 days, two-thirds of them in the northeastern regions of Catalonia and Aragon. It's a figure which has more than tripled in 2 weeks, prompting Spain's autonomous regions to step up security measures. The Madrid region moved to make mask wearing obligatory at all times in public on Tuesday, even while having a drink at a bar terrace, where gatherings will now be limited to groups of 10. Restricting numbers to a maximum of 10 guests has also been recommended for people entertaining at home. Although less affected by the recent outbreaks, Madrid has decided to ready a field hospital at a conference center on the city's eastern outskirts. But Catalonia, where the virus has flared up, has taken more drastic steps and on July 18 advised 4 million residents in and around Barcelona to stay at home. Even so, tourists could still be found visiting the city, saying they felt safe, with British yacht skipper Paul Callahan, 62, telling AFP TV he felt safer in Spain than back home. And Ines Meinen, a 53-year-old hotel employee from Germany, says she too felt safe. Although Spain is the country with the highest instance of cases per 100,000 people, other European countries are also struggling to contain outbreaks. Belgium has toughened the rules after a worrying surge saw virus cases rising by more than 70%, imposing a curfew in its second city, Antwerp, limiting gatherings and making face masks compulsory where social distancing is not possible. The rapid rise in numbers in Germany is also very worrying, top health experts said on Tuesday, urging citizens to keep their distance and wear face masks. And Greece said it was making masks compulsory again in shops and public services after a recent rise in infections. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Beverly, for your updates there. Thank you, EBC Spain Bureau.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting from Barcelona, Spain, I am Beverly Madrid, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Bev. Now, Australian officials were eyeing tighter restrictions in the nation's second biggest city Friday as hundreds more coronavirus cases were recorded despite more than 3 weeks in lockdown. As Greater Melbourne passed the halfway point of a lockdown initially intended to last 6 weeks, Premier Daniel Andrews said the state would be stuck in limbo unless it could cut the infection rate. Meanwhile, here's Professor Michael Kidd, Deputy Chief Medical Officer. Let's listen in.
This is a national update. In the past 24 hours, 651 people have been diagnosed as new cases of COVID-19 in Australia. This is the second largest daily number of diagnoses of COVID-19 in our country, only preceded by yesterday when we reported 747 new cases. The level of new diagnoses remains concerning. 8 days ago, we had over 500 cases reported for the first time, and the trend continues to be upwards. 16,905 people have now been diagnosed as COVID-19 positive in Australia. Over the past 24 hours, 627 of these new cases were in Victoria. 21 new cases have been reported in New South Wales. 2 of these are overseas acquired, and these people are in hotel quarantine, and 16 cases have been locally acquired. The people who have died in the past 24 hours were aged in their 50s, 70s and 80s.
Mainly I'm concerned for our children, their education side of it, because it can be affected by it, and even the economy.
It's sad. It's concerning. People are anxious. People are starting to fall depressed because, they can't leave the house. All you do is go to work, come home. If you're working, if you're unemployed, you rely on government social security sort of thing. So, like a lot of other countries like New Zealand, they've overcome the problem. So maybe we should go into a harsher lockdown and get it done and move on.
Victoria State, of which Melbourne is the capital, reported over 600 cases on Friday and 8 deaths. A drop after recording the nation's highest daily toll Thursday with 18 deaths and 723 cases. Half of the new deaths were connected to aged care homes in the city, and the state's top health official said any increase in restrictions had really significant consequences, but admitted tougher rules were now being considered, including a strict lockdown and widespread business closures successfully used in neighboring New Zealand. New Zealand has not recorded a locally transmitted case from an unknown source in over 90 days and only 22 deaths in a population of 5 million. Australia's cases ticked towards 17,000 on Friday, recording 196 deaths in a population of 25 million. And virus quarantine fears has boosted the staycation in the United Kingdom. Joining us, or here's the report from Erica Celestino. Erica.
Yes, Alma. The latest updates here in the United Kingdom are that the new UK quarantine rules affected and boosted the demand for staycations. So, Alma, British hotels, campsites and restaurants were only allowed to reopen late in July, and business has slowly picked up. However, the government's announcement on Sunday that those traveling from Spain now need to self-isolate for 14 days following a spike in cases that has shaken up summer plans. With the threat of other countries joining the list as cases rise across Europe, many are considering staycations in Britain rather than risk having to self-isolate for 2 weeks, particularly those who cannot work from home. A UK staycation carries much less disruptive risk. Jane Pendlebury, Executive Director of the Hospitality Professionals Association and Hotel Industry Association, told AFP. Also adding, of course, the threat of regional outbreaks is real, but the restrictions imposed won't be as impactful, with returning home from within the UK far easier than doing so from abroad. But even if more Britons decide to stay put this year, it is unlikely to make up the shortfall for the tourism sector, which is pleading with the government for help to weather the crisis. Visit Britain, British tourism's lobbying body, estimates that the number of foreign tourists could fall by as much as 60% this year due to the pandemic. Also, Alma, the Labour opposition, has already warned of an unemployment crisis, with rates rising faster than the national average in the English regions most dependent on tourism, such as Cornwall, Southwest, Yorkshire, North, and the Lake District in Northwest. Destinations popular with foreign tourists, such as Bath, Southwest England, are also struggling to draw in the crowds. The sight of a few tourists milling around the city's famous Roman baths is in stark contrast to the usual number of visitors that packs out the city, which normally welcomes around 6 million visitors a year. Now, Alma, for lighter news, UK government introduces a scheme to help out restaurants. Eat Out to Help Out scheme begins on the 3rd of August and ends on the 31st of August. Customers will have a 50% discount when eating in at restaurants that are registered with the scheme. More than 53,000 outlets across the UK have so far signed up. As Eat Out to Help Out stickers and posters start to appear in the windows of restaurants, cafes, bars, and other establishments, customers who want to take advantage of the scheme are advised to look out for the logo. It is valid all day Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 3 to 31 of August in all parts of the UK that are not in a local lockdown. The maximum discount available is £10 per person when you eat or drink in. Diners can take advantage of the offer as many times as they like during the month. You do not need a voucher to use this scheme, and you can use it at the same time as other offers and discounts. There is no minimum spend. You cannot claim discount on alcoholic drinks or service charges. According to the UK government, Alma, the discount will be automatically available to you at participating establishments. Establishments will then claim a reimbursement from the government for the discount they've given you. Participating establishments may include restaurants, cafes, bars, or pubs, like mentioned earlier, and work and school canteens and food halls. All diners in a group of any size can use the discount. From Tower Bridge here in London, United Kingdom, I am Erica Celestino. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Erica. Eagle News will be right back.
Tomorrow, I love ya. Tomorrow, you're always a day away.
Hong Kong's democracy supporters were dealt a huge blow on Friday as authorities postponed local elections because of the coronavirus, capping a devastating month of political disqualifications, arrests for social media posts, and activists fleeing overseas. On Friday evening, Chief Executive Carrie Lam, a pro-Beijing appointee, announced that September elections for the city's legislature would need to be delayed. She also described the announcement as the most difficult decision she has made since the pandemic began, and that Beijing supported the move. The decision will infuriate democracy supporters who had warned against any moves to delay the polls, accusing authorities of using the pandemic to avoid a drubbing at the ballot box. It also came a day after dozen prominent democracy activists were barred from standing for election because their political views were deemed to be unacceptable. The city's democracy camp has come under sustained attack since Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law on the city last month, a move China's leaders described as a sword hanging over the head of its critics. The ensuing weeks have radically transformed a city used to speaking its mind and supposedly guaranteed certain freedoms and autonomy in a one country, two systems deal agreed ahead of its 1997 handover from Britain. And prominent Hong Kong dissident Joshua Wong held a press conference a day after he and other activists were barred from standing for election. Let's listen in.
Today, with their sweepingly arbitrary power, electoral officers have extended their political vetting also to my friends like Gwyneth Ho, Tiffany Yuen, Lester Trump, and other pan-Democrats and even incumbents. Beyond any doubt, it's the most scandalous election fraud ever in Hong Kong history. Our voice is clear and loud to the world by our vote. We stand to defend our freedom and right that's stipulated in the Joint Declaration and the Basic Law. Barring me from running the election would not stop our cause for democracy, even though the government may soon declare democratic aspiration illegal under the new law.
Meanwhile, the Civic Party, one of Hong Kong's long-standing prominent pro-democracy parties, says that 4 of its members had been disqualified from standing in September's legislative elections, a move decried by candidates as the most pressing assault yet on Beijing's critics in the city. Take a look.
OK 啊，好。如果大家係睇過下嗰4，
And I think today we are seeing the results of the relentless oppression that this regime is starting. Not only just to take away the basic fundamental rights and freedom that was once enjoyed by all Hong Kong people under the Basic Law as promised under the Sino-British Joint Declaration, but they also try to drive fear and oppression into our hearts. And this, we must not let them succeed.
Clearly, Beijing showed a total disregard for the will of all Hong Kongers, tramples upon the city's last pillar of vanishing autonomy, and attempt to keep Hong Kong legislature under its firm grip.
And they wanted to really silence Hong Kong by doing so, but I think they are definitely overdone it. The international society community would definitely pay more attention on Hong Kong and implementing more countermeasures.
Meanwhile, British MP Ian Duncan Smith said the free world has now got to decide what it's going to do about China after a dozen candidates were disqualified for standing in the elections, supposedly the upcoming elections in Hong Kong. Let's listen in.
Today, with their sweepingly arbitrary power, electoral officers have extended.
I'm afraid this is a terrible blow, backward step, but it does demonstrate that the free world has now got to decide what it's going to do about China, and it certainly can't continue as though nothing has happened. And to do that, number one for us now is to carry out a strategic review of our economic dependency on China, and with a view to reducing it dramatically. And I would urge other countries now to do exactly the same, to have a strategic review and reduce their dependency on China. It's only by doing this does the message get through to the Chinese government that we simply won't tolerate their arrogant behavior and their bullying nature towards their neighbors and everybody else. It's quite obvious that they're going to disavow the BNO passport as a legitimate passport. And that means basically they're going to stop anybody leaving Hong Kong on those passports. So the UK government has got to move quickly to give people a way out if they wish it now. So we haven't got time to wait till the new year. We've got to do it now. The second thing, we now need to start putting sanctions on Hong Kong officials and Chinese officials across a range of issues. I think there's growing resolve, actually, funnily enough. 6 months ago, probably not. But now people are really upset with China. The COVID outbreak has made it worse because people are now pretty certain that COVID has of itself should have been known about much earlier, and the human-to-human transfer should have been known about November last year. The Chinese ambassador at the best times is bizarre, and he was caught by Andrew Ma trying to defend the indefensible when you could see that there are a whole group of Uyghurs about to be shipped out on trains. I have to tell you, I thought that was shockingly reminiscent of what was going on in the 1930s and 40s when Jews and other undesirables, as they were termed, in what was then Nazi Germany, were being shipped into concentration camps to be used as slave labor. It seems the same is happening in China. So he was caught acting as the apologist for that and threatening everybody.
Britain's interventions in Hong Kong have seriously poisoned the atmosphere of relations with China. That is according to Beijing's ambassador in London. Now, Ambassador Liu Xiaoming also accused Western powers and media of spreading the lies of the century in their reporting of the treatment of Uyghur Muslims in China. Let's listen in again.
On Xinjiang, the UK disregarded the facts, confused right and wrong, flaunted slanders recklessly at China's Xinjiang-related policies, and interfered in China's internal affairs by raising the so-called human rights issue in Xinjiang, bilaterally and multilaterally. These actions have seriously poisoned the atmosphere of China-UK relationship. The issue of Huawei is not about how the UK sees and deals with a Chinese company. It's about how the UK sees and deals with China. Does it see China as an opportunity, or partner, or a threat, or rival? Does it see China as a friendly country, or a hostile, or potentially hostile state?
Britain and China have also fallen out over the role of Chinese tech firm Huawei in building Britain's 5G network, with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson announcing earlier this month that its involvement would be phased out over security concerns. The ambassador claimed that US President Trump was targeting China due to the upcoming election and that the US president wanted a new Cold War. The World Health Organization warned that spikes in coronavirus transmission in a number of countries were being driven by young people lifting down their guard. Let's listen in.
Although older people are at a higher risk of severe disease, younger people are at risk too. One of the challenges we face is convincing younger people of this risk. Evidence suggested that spikes of cases in some countries are being driven in part by younger people letting down their guard during the Northern Hemisphere summer. We have said it before, and we will say it again. Young people are not invincible. Young people can be infected. Young people can die. And young people can transmit the virus to others. That's why young people must take the same precautions to protect themselves and protect others as everyone else. They can be leaders. They should be leaders and drivers of change.
What we know about young people is that young people can be infected. Young people can transmit the virus to others. The majority of young people who are infected tend to have more mild disease, but that is not always consistent. We know that young people can develop severe disease. We know that young people can end up in ICU, and we know that young people can die. Certainly,
it's quite clear, and COVID-19 causes an inflammatory disease in the lungs, but it's also been clearly demonstrated that the inflammatory process extends into the cardiovascular system, into the blood, into the heart, potentially into other organs. So in many cases, this disease, while it may be mild or it may be moderate, it can affect many organs. And we just don't know what the long-term impacts of those infections will be. And if we just look maybe at, there's one recent scientific review of patients in Germany, in Frankfurt, looking at patients who weren't admitted to hospital, who were considered to be relatively mild. And those patients who never had to be admitted to hospital were followed up and had MRIs, magnetic resonance imaging of their hearts done over time. And they were found to have prolonged changes, inflammatory changes in their cardiac, the linings of their heart and the cardiac muscles. So now that may and will probably resolve itself in most of those patients. But when you start to see inflammatory changes that are prolonged, and we all know what, inflammation is essentially the body's reaction to the presence of a virus or something else. But inflammatory responses can also in themselves do damage, and they can do long-term damage. And any inflammatory process in the cardiovascular system can lead to longer-term heart disease and can actually accelerate other chronic heart conditions that may develop much later in life, but we could accelerate the development of what would be older age cardiovascular disease by having lots and lots of younger people exposed to a disease that caused generalized inflammation. And we just don't know. Why take the chance? Why take the risk? It's really important that we take those options that protect our health too. And yes, we want people to be altruistic and reach out to protect others, but it's also play safe. Use your brain, use your mind. Don't take a risk that you cannot quantify. And these risks right now cannot be adequately quantified. And when we say that the vast majority of people have a mild illness and recover, that is true. But what we cannot say at the moment is what are the potential long-term impacts of having had that infection. We hope that everybody who recovers from COVID-19 will make a full and permanent recovery. But there's enough people out there having difficulties with their exercise tolerance, having difficulties with their breathing, and potentially having long-term impacts on their cardiovascular system that we want to try and avoid all COVID infections if possible, not just those COVID infections that lead to death. We need to avoid all COVID-19 infections, both in terms of reducing transmission, but also in reducing the long-term health impacts of this disease.
Nation after nation across Europe on Friday unveiled the extent of historic economic devastation as resurgent coronavirus cases forced agonizing new trade-offs between lives and financial health. 6 months after the World Health Organization declared a global emergency, the novel coronavirus has infected more than 70 million people and wreaked global economic mayhem. France's economy contracted by a record 13.8% in the second quarter. Spain went into a recession after its gross domestic product slumped 18.5%. Portugal's economy contracted 14.1%, and Italy's GDP plunged 12.4%. Europe as a whole was hammered by its sharpest recorded contraction in the second quarter, with GDP down 12.1% in the Eurozone and 11.9% across the Union. Airline conglomerate IAG, the owner of British Airways, posted a first-half net loss of 3.8 billion euros. UK bank NatWest slid into the red, while Dutch airline KLM and truck maker Scania said they were each shedding 5,000 jobs. The European travel giant, whose portfolio also includes Aer Lingus, Level and Vueling, said in a results statement that the loss after taxation in the 6 months to June compared with year-earlier profit of 806 million euros. The airline conglomerate has been ravaged this year by COVID-19, which grounded planes worldwide as global lockdowns and border closures sought to halt the spread of the disease. The London-listed Titan has meanwhile embarked upon a massive job-slashing efficiency drive in line with other carriers like Air Canada, American Airlines, and Lufthansa. In the related news, millions of households in Manchester and nearby parts of northern England woke up to new lockdown rules on Friday, hastily imposed following concerns over a spike in regional coronavirus infections. Under the measures, people from different households in the affected areas are banned from meeting indoors. They apply to some 4 million people across Greater Manchester and parts of the counties of Lancashire and Yorkshire. Health Secretary Matt Hancock said the restrictions were being brought in because people were meeting and not abiding to social distancing. The new restrictions come just days after Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned of a second wave of the pandemic elsewhere in Europe. The NBA launched its coronavirus hit season on Thursday with players taking a knee during the U.S. national anthem in a show of support for Black Lives Matter movement. LeBron James vowed to no let-up in the fight for social injustice as the NBA's virus hit season made an emotional return in Orlando. Take a look.
Like I said, using this platform, using who I am, I try to use it for the greater good, and I hope I make people proud. I hope I, make my kids proud of my, not only my household, but also, like in my school and things of that nature in my community. 2020 is something that we've never seen before, so we are in the land of the unknown, and then things are happening for the first time. So you just take it for what it is. Don't take the moment for granted because we are still living and alive, and we're back to doing what we love to do, either covering the game, or playing the game, or watching the game, or being able to report the game as you guys are doing. So, that is a blessing. 2020 has been.
Yeah, I was proud to do it, proud to support our players, proud to support the African American community, and proud to support racial justice. We've got the greatest country in the world, but we're flawed.
4 months after the league shut down in March due to the pandemic, the NBA is restarting its season with 22 teams based inside a secure bubble at Disney World in Orlando, Florida. The unprecedented NBA experiment began on Thursday with the Utah Jazz defeating the New Orleans Pelicans 106-104 in an empty arena at the resort's ESPN Wide World of Sports complex. And the first and last points of the game were scored by Utah's Rudy Gobert, the Frenchman whose COVID-19 case triggered the NBA shutdown in March. LeBron James then led the Los Angeles Lakers to a pulsating 103-101 defeat of the Los Angeles Clippers in the day's second game. And finally, in our news, Tokyo's influential Mori Art Museum reopened after a 5-month hiatus with one of its most high-profile Japanese art shows in years. With works by Japanese Yayoi Kusama and Takashi Murakami, let's take a look.
の大変な時にで美術館の役割は何か、もしくはアートの役割とは何かというようなことが問われている時に、こうした長いキャリアを持つ大変力強い展覧会で美術館を再開できることは大変良かったなと思っています。
In time of physical and emotional distance, we give importance to the unsung service delivered by our frontliners. Our news correspondents positioned all over the world. Without them, we would not have the eagle-eye focus on the facts of this pandemic and its continuing repercussions on our lives. To our international correspondents, thank you for staying in touch with our viewers. Stay safe, protect yourselves and others. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.